Mounce, BBG, chapter 19, sentence 7. Such a long one that I actually had to make the font smaller, so forgive me for that. But once again, it starts with this clause that hopefully everybody recognizes because you've read it so often as truly, truly, I say to y'all, and make sure you recognize that as a plural, okay? So second person personal pronoun, but it's in the plural. So truly, truly, I say to y'all. And then, he gives you this, but the idea is this is, again, where I'm going to probably differ from Mounce. He's going to have something like one who believes. And because this is actually a substantival participle, I'm going to keep that ing idea in there to keep the participial idea going, in which case you have something like the one believing. And either way is fine, but like I said, I'm going to always, for your benefit, try to keep it as close to the grammar as I can, just to help clarify it in your mind. And again, this is a participle, and as a participle, I like to keep that idea, that ing idea in there. So, all right, truly, truly, I say to y'all, the one believing, ace ma, all right. And in me, that should be easy enough. Now, you're used to seeing just the mu epsilon, but if you remember, when you initially memorize those personal pronouns, that can also have an epsilon in front, and it's the same form. It's still accusative singular, but it's from ego, of course. But just need to know that that is often in there, and of course, part of that equation is because it follows a sigma. So, just the way that slides together, made it easier to toss that epsilon in there. So you'll see that in the future. All right. Then you have ta erga. Hopefully you recognize that as coming from ergon, or work. But then you realize that if you say ergon, that it's neuter. So now you see the alpha, and you say that that's plural, either nominative or accusative. And then you say the works. So the one believing in me, comma, because this is a different, it's like a different idea. Believing in me, the works, well, that's not going to work. So, I'd hit a comma here, and then the works. You have your relative pronoun, which I do, and you recognize this is coming from poieo, and just a present active indicative first singular, but again, the epsilon contracts, and that's why you have that circumflex, right? So hopefully you recognize that right away. And you have, I'm sorry, I meant to grab that, the works which I do, all right? And of course, on an exam, what would I ask you about? I'd ask you about that relative pronoun, wouldn't I? All right, so we're going to go back to that relative pronoun before we go here, all right? So if we look at that relative pronoun and say the works which I do, then you got case, number, gender. For number, gender, you look back, and we know that ha is either going to be, well, whether it's nominative or accusative, we know that it's neuter plural, and that lines up with works. So we're good with saying that the number gender lines up with the antecedent, and the antecedent in this case is the works. So we're good there. Then we say, okay, case is how it fits in the relative clause, and it's which I do. Well, there's already a subject. So ha cannot be nominative, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, it already has the relative clause, already has a subject. Here's your verb, which I do. So it's I do. This has got to be accusative, therefore, since you already have a subject. So I do, and then this has got to be accusative, referring back to works. I do works. Well, that makes it fit perfectly. So again, this is going to be accusative because it replaces the direct object within the relative clause, and the word that it's replacing within the relative clause is works. All right. So again, that is the kind of thing that I would be tempted to ask, because I want you to be familiar with how relative pronouns work in Greek differently than English. Here's one that might fool you. And the reason is it's actually a contraction. And hopefully you picked up on that, but it's actually a contraction of chi and then a Koine. I'm sorry, I meant to try to be more careful here. Not going to do it for me. A Kainos. Well, forget about it. All right, chi and a Kainos. So it's and that one, but the problem is you have the verb here, and if you translate it as and, it's and that one will do, but and doesn't work well. So you got to remember that and can also be even or also, and in this case I'll probably run with also and come back here and say the works which I do also that one will do. Okay. So again, always keeping in mind that chi can be any of the three, and you look at the context and say, okay, is it just kind of weird if I use and? Maybe they're trying to communicate a different idea, and here they are. They're trying to say even or also, and I think the idea is, again, he's sort of comparing and saying the works that I'm doing, they're also going to do those works. So here you're going to run with also. Also, that one already gave you away this verb, but that's all right. You see the sigma, you know that it's from poieo, contract verb. Hopefully you see that. You see epsilon iota, and you say, well, that's third singular. And that's, here's your subject is that one. So that lines up in terms of subject and verb agreement. So, he will do, but it's that one. So also that one will do. And then you come to your chi. So jumping back for just a second, the works which I do, that one also will do, would be a good translation. And medzona, hopefully you recognize that is greater, greater. And then here you have the genitive plural, of course, and demonstrative pronoun. So greater from these. And of course, we wouldn't say from these. That wouldn't collocate right. We would say greater than these. So, but again, if you hand me in a translation that says greater from these, I'm certainly not going to count it wrong. It's just not the way we collocate it in English. So, phrase like this, greater than these, is perfectly fine translation. And you got the same exact verb, so he will do. And he will do them. Why? Because, and here again, you don't have it following a verb of communication or cognition, right? So if you had a verb of communication or cognition right before this, you might say they were going to give the content of the communication or cognition, but that's not here. So it's more likely a reason, which means it's more likely a because, and that's the way you're going to run with it. So, and it's because ego I. And then if I just treat this last clause as a word by word, to the Father go, then I can come back and say, because I go to the Father. All right. And why is ton batera in the accusative? Is in the accusative not because it's the direct object, right? It is in the accusative because it is the object of the preposition pros, and pros can take the accusative as its object. Okay, so one last time just to run through the whole sentence. Truly, truly, I say to y'all, the one believing in me, comma, the works which I do, also that one will do, and greater than these he will do, comma, because I go to the Father.